Hey there, Shaz Barbaric, reading out of Nader, Ralph Nader's book from Seven Stories Press. Came out in December, winter of 2018, entitled To the Ramparts. To the Ramparts. Does it have a subtitle? To the Ramparts, how Bush and Obama paved the way for the Trump presidency, and why it isn't too late to reverse course. Reverse course from... Come on, Ralph. Reverse course from paving the way for the... He's already president. So, Bush, what happened? Bush and Obama paved the way. So that's great. You're connecting them both. I like that. And I read later on in the book how you connect them. Their actions support each other, same values. And for some reason, you also want us to join this Democratic Party, which might just be a Democratic progressive value washing over the same interest of the Republican Party. That's the argument you're making in the subtext. But anyways, Bush and Obama, I like that. Now what they're doing, they're paving the way for Trump. So Trump's their fault because of their actions. So Trump is, we're like, Trump. That's why we bought this. Because we want people to explain Trump. Trump. Well, it was Bush and Obama. Oh, that's going to be cool. You'll explain that. And it isn't too late to reverse course. Reverse what course though? Like, you said that they're the reason we got Trump, and now we have Trump. How do we reverse from Trump? So it's like, but that shows you right there. So it doesn't take long to see how someone believes what they believe in. You're not offering us any solution, any future. All right, so we have Bush, Obama, and Trump. There's three presidents now covering 20 years, 2000 to now 2020. We're going. Go backwards. That's the same as Make America Great Again and everything else you've been saying in this. Raise the minimum wage in 1968. You're not offering us any movement forwards. I'm Shaz Barrick. I'm offering a solution, a third political party, myself as a minimum viable product candidate. Hopefully there's other presidential candidates, other congressional candidates who come out and we all just flood the fucking shit. 2020. But see, that's not reversing course. That's charting a new direction ahead in order to save ourselves from the collective suicide that we all seem to have culturally signed up for. By being born American, I seem to have signed up for an empire and a cultural suicide that I see played out in slow motion all around me. It's kind of depressing. Might be why I'm in a homeless shelter right now. Ralph Nader. Reverse course. You're right, Ralph. We're going to stop Trump from being president. I got you. Fucking dumbass. Okay. You started off on a bad foot today, Ralph. Hopefully you do better. When people were in the streets, the Dems were behind their desks. I would have put, when people were in the streets, the Dems were off their feet. I would have rhymed street somehow. He went for the alliteration, Dems behind the desk. I don't know. Listen, one of us is a poet, I guess. This is going to be hard. I have to get all the way up to fucking like 47. And right now I'm at 32. So we're going to read quickly. Let's do a page and then commentary. That's what we'll do. A remarkable failure by Obama and the Democrats was their inability to take up the programs advocated by grassroots uprisings such as those in Wisconsin or Occupy Wall Street's national actions in 2011, which signaled the younger public's disgust with the status quo and demand for progressive policies. Failing to join the occupiers on the ramparts contributed further for the Democrats' loss of legitimacy. And on the other side, the occupiers' disinterest in politics, perhaps due to the lack of spirit shown by the Dems, proved fatal to advancing their agenda against inequality more concretely. Imagine, if you will, in the following fictional narrative, how plutocrats and perhaps the Democrats themselves viewed the Occupy movement. Stetson... Oh, I'm not going to fucking get into this. I'm going to do these two paragraphs first, and then I'll do this whole fake conversation. It's like, what do you want to be, Rob? Come on. I want to be president. I want to affect change. If there's any ego in this, it's to come up with my own political theory, which stands the test of time and wedges little Shazbar back into the history books among a bunch of other dumbasses. But what do you want? You want to be a fucking writer? You want to... This is kind of flowery. It's flowery to introduce a fake conversation or to get your points across. But I guess, I don't know, that's your writing style. Is you know what you want to say, and then you fit it into your narrative structure. So let's pull this out. What are you trying to say? 'Cause I got my own narrative structure. I don't need your fucking Story times with Ralph. So, remarkable failure by Obama's. So, inability to take up the program. And also, once you start to get someone's style, I just look for the verbs and the nouns, and I just ignore the rest of the shit. Okay, they failed. They didn't take up the grassroots uprisings, the programs. And that's what is he saying? How is he defining these things? Grassroots uprisings is what he calls us. I was with Occupy Wall Street myself. And he says we have programs, such as those in Wisconsin, Occupy Wall Street. But that was the whole thing, is we weren't trying to be a Republican or Democrat. We were trying to be non-party with an anti-corporatist platform, pretty much, which we were starting to vocalize. We were getting into, it's like, what are your demands? We were figuring out our organizational structure first. And then we were sabotaged before we could form a long-term organizational structure. I thought we were going to be like World Can't Wait, or like I thought we were going the non-profit route, but we had enough saboteurs, I think, within that I experienced, who funneled all the money out before we can actually consolidate it under actual leadership. Anyways, Ralph Nader's going to have his opinions. Are discussed in the status quo and demands for progressive policies. I see how I said anti-corporatist. No matter how much you argue about Occupy Wall Street and what we presented, we all hated the fucking Citizens United. We all hated Monsanto. Whenever he said fuck Monsanto, people yelled out. We had a lot of different ideas about what should be our priority, but we all acknowledged that corporations had too much control in our politics. But he says we were the status quo and demands for progressive policies. He's trying to shoehorn us into his argument. And then he says that we're on the ramparts. So again, the French Revolution. It's like, no, dude, I'm not. We're out there trying to meet other people, talk about shit that's outside the dominant narratives. It's the biggest part of Occupy Wall Street. If you ask anyone who went to any of the Occupy, it's probably the conversations and the people they met and the type of connections they were making. And that's what blew your mind. It's like, we're all stuck in our bubble, and it was a place to actually grow politically and personally outside of the dominant culture. We created our own culture. People getting the tattoos and this and that. And so he says we're on the rampant parts. It's like, no, I don't want to be a part of your revolution. I don't want to be a part of your revolutionary language. I don't want an excuse for the Jacobins to come in later on and all the other shit that comes with this fucking romantic revolutionary bullshit. I've dealt with it. I fucked those girls. I've had those conversations. I had those fucking hostels that kicked me out because I didn't want to go along with their bullshit. I don't want to. Ramparts is a loaded word. Fuck you and take it back. I'm not on anyone's ramparts. I'm out here just doing shaz, and we're trying to contribute to a better world, whatever that means. I don't think it means bloody revolution. If I fucking fight you, it's not going to be on a rampart. It's going to be according to military science and the latest fucking strategy and techniques of ramparts. You want us to fucking fight a modern war with fucking 17th century tactics? Come on, dude. 18th century, whatever. Just the language. It's like, people don't listen to the words that they use. We're on the ramparts. You get this, like he says, founding fathers is another one that bugs me. We don't need that language anymore. It's kind of holding us back. It's limiting our creativity and our ability to actually address the issues that we're facing. That's enough for me. And then he says, the occupiers' disinterest in politics. We didn't trust y'all. We didn't trust anyone in politics. Maybe if we had created our own thing. We were still working on that. We were working on this seems to happen in history, is when you have an actual native democratic movement from the ground up, from affected people to try to control their own destiny because they've been disenfranchised, so they get together. The natural organizations will become direct democratic. You have to grow out of that to representative democratic, but at first everyone wants a say. And the struggles that seem to happen anthropologically when you're at that point is that you're going to get a split between the pure anarchists who don't believe in democracy at all. And if we can't all just manage ourselves, then they're just going to break off and say, well, fuck it, I'm an anarchist and I don't agree with any authority anyways, so fucking fight me. Those are the guys that are the separatists, like even the communists sometimes, but they go off and they just say, we're going to create our own rules. But not even, so the communists are another part. They're saying that, well, we want to agree on the authority, we want to create the authority, we need a central authority. So anyways, basically, at the first gathering of a natural democratic impulse within people who have been disenfranchised, it seems like you're going to have debates over authority and the authority of the central identity which you're creating, which now you're going to ask everyone to submit to. You're going to vest it with authority to accept and expel people from the group. So that's like the corporation, like the corporate body, the collective social body. That's the stage we were at in Occupy Wall Street. We were gathering together. We were wondering. The thing is, since that direct democracy, consensus-based conversation everyone was kind of hooked with, that's what happened. It drew people in like sugar. It drew me, and you felt it in your chest. You're like, wow, a productive social discussion. When it was good, those general assemblies, it was good. You actually felt like you bought into a group identity, and you've accomplished something as a group, logically. Everyone, Max Bean, I wrote about him, he wrote about it. It was an infectious energy because it's a way of communicating and participating socially that we don't currently have or develop. It's like someone who doesn't walk, going on a walk and realizing how just natural it is to you. Or swimming, it's a natural human function. Or I don't know, maybe there's something else. But it's like doing something that, exploring a part of you that is a natural part of you that you've never explored before. But that's what democratic, efficient social organizing is. And direct democracy at its best can be like that. So we were at that point where we were like, we had to decide what our values were so we could create an identity people would buy into. And there's too much antagonism, purposeful sabotage, and then also the resources that we had were being squandered, and also those were certain people were getting control over that. I asked to audit the books, and I got some heat for that. I was trying to get everything on the same page, turn it into a nonprofit. But they say disinterest in politics, perhaps due to the lack of spirit shown by the Dems, proved fatal. It's like, no, dude, we've decided that we don't want any part of the Democratic or Republican Party. The current generations have decided that because of your track record. So stop pushing that shit. Anyways, let's go on into his fucking fake-ass letter. I wasted enough time on this. Stetson J. Bradford III met up with his fellow CEO, F. Reginald Lawless, for a brow-to-brow lunch at the Penthouse Reverie Room, high above Wall and Broad Streets in New York. As charter members of the 40-year Corporate Supremes Club, they had serious business to discuss before Thanksgiving weekend in 2011. And that's when I arrived at Occupy Wall Street, November 1st, 2011. Topic numero uno is the Occupy Wall Street movement and its sister occurrences all around the country, the precursor to the giant people's upheaval that they and their brethren had feared ever since Wall Street's collapsed. Wall Street collapsed the American economy in 2008 and sent the bill to the taxpayers. So they're on Wall and Broad in New York, high above Wall and Broad at the Penthouse Reverie Room. I need to look that up if it's a real place. All of his fucking like rich shaming doesn't really affect me. We want like inequality to not be so terrible in society, but if you work hard and you're smart and get the fucking, there has to be some meritocratic element to our economy. So I'm like, I like fancy places. I want to make some money. I'll check that out. What? The fucking Penthouse Reverie Room is on the bucket list. But topics are they, and he says sister occurrences. There are thousands, dude, all across the United States. It's a shame. That's what he's talking about. How the Democrats and everyone fucking didn't pay attention to us. What about history? What about the larger picture of the fact that could just be erased from history? That big of a fucking action. Over their large whiskey sour savored prior to consuming the lobster lunch. Like, why is the rich shaming? It's like, fuck it. I can't have a whiskey shower or a lobster lunch. Come on, dude. Let's make arguments based off of logic, not based off of emotional triggering. You're below 10% right now, Ralph. They shared their innermost thoughts in nearly whispered tones under grave visages. Bradford. I'm worried, Reg. This could be a big one all of us have been dreading. It's always the ruffians and the demagogues who are the vanguard. Remember the sacking of the Bastille? He really likes the fucking French Revolution. Lawless. I beg to differ, Stet. It's always the middle class that raises the banner of revolt, at least in the past couple centuries. These people down at... so now we're talking history. It's like cherry-picking bits of history to support his cultural argument about the French Revolution. And he's like basically paint by numbers, emotional triggering of the cultural left and cultural progressives. But we're not really going to look at like over centuries. And history is like, you got to justify, contextualize some of that stuff. Come on, dude. Then let's talk about imperialism. If we're talking about, middle class raising the banner of revolt over a couple centuries. What are the operating systems here over those couple centuries? Imperialism. And then those drive the domestic and foreign policy and the interaction between the two. We are out in the park mostly for the war. That's the main, biggest bullshit everyone sees still. If you talk to anyone down there, these people down in Zuccotti Park aren't relatable to the majority of people. Well, with their sanitation problems and the worsening influx of the homeless and vagrant crowd in their public spaces. But, I mean, I understand that these are characters that Ralph Nader just made up, but does he have to include, like, this homeless and vagrant, like, that type of bashing? I know I'm a little sensitive, maybe, because I'm part of the homeless right now, but it's just, we're not relatable with the sanitation and the worst. Are we, though? People are coming down there to visit us and talk to us all the time. And sanitation problems, you're just pulling that out of the fucking... This is a problem with you and your newspaper clippings. You're just relying on that. That's what we're getting a lot of bad press in order to shut us down. So they'd say we have sanitation problems, this and that, but it was a decent squat. It was like we kept ourselves relatively clean. We had a sanitation team that would go around and clean stuff up in our public places. What do you mean? It was a park with a lot of tents, and we had little streets and corridors. Our public places. We did have public common grounds where we would speak and have a general assembly. It wasn't a self-organized practice in anarchy beyond the government, where we set up in a public place. A lot of people decided to start living together to talk about to have a political discussion. That's nascent democracy. Oppressed people coming out saying, let's start organizing ourselves. And that's where we got squashed. So I think the most interesting conversation would be like, that's interesting that happens naturally, which is supportive of anarchist theory, that we need less authority to allow the natural expression of self-governance to come out. But I mean, that's my interpretation of it. But he's saying, what is he saying? Well, he's characterizing us. Bradford, maybe so, but look at the daily mass media coverage of these people calling themselves the 99%. I've never seen anything like it. The TV and newspaper reports on these encampments everywhere. I mean, like, that media coverage was mostly shitty. They didn't really fucking talk to us. They made fun of us for the most part. Also, the polls show that they have more support for their message against inequality than the Tea Partiers did for their push. Recall what Abraham Lincoln said about what can be done with public sentiment. So this is like Ralph Nader has like a list of quotes, a list of facts, and he's shoehorning them into this narrative. I've read like this, Ralph. I understand how you do it. You're like, that Lincoln quote was just like sitting there. He was like, I think I put it in in Bradford's voice. Also, you can't bring up the Tea Partiers as like a legitimate public fucking protest movement. The call went out by Adbusters, the magazine. But I came out from California. So many people just came out because of the call. Tea Partiers is AstroTurf, funded by the Koch brothers. That came out already. They already proved that. Their money came from corporate sources. The Soros Foundation was involved with us. We used their corporation as an umbrella to collect donations. And I think there were a handful of people in the park who were fucking working for them, working for trade unions. But we were as a spontaneous. That's what Tea Partiers, you saw stuff in some cities. You can't even compare that to how many cities Occupy happened. How many spontaneous protests and the level of violence, the level of mass confrontation with the cops. You can't equivocate. That's interesting. Ralph Nader's not the person to talk about the Occupy protest movement. Lawless. Let me calm you, Stat. We know from our disheveled infiltrators what is going on in these encampments, except maybe small ones like in Little Niles, Michigan. It's our sort of jobs program, barring some flashy provocation caught on video, like a sneering Wall Street trader kicking a child beggar in the gutter. What is this fucking Dickinsonian fucking literature? Is like there's so much important structural shit at the highest levels of society we should be talking about and trying to solve. And he's talking about Wall Street traders kicking a child beggar into the gutter. Come on, dude. This is now becoming an excuse to just paint emotional images to trigger people. The occupiers will soon be frozen out of the public consciousness by both the coming winter and a bored media. Yeah, I lasted until March. Yeah, February or March. Yeah, I lasted through February to March. So no, we lasted through the winter. I mean, this time around, Was this fucking 8 years later? Yeah, 8 years later. Wow. No, 7 years later. I'm in New York. I'm homeless. I fucking created and then given up a real estate company. I made $500,000. I lived a lot. Had a lot of relationships, a lot of living, a lot of experience, a lot of interactions, business interactions, other stuff. That's interesting to think back to that. Yeah, no, we survived. Look, and you get used to the cold. Once you get shelter, it's easier. Now I'm on retirement. Fucking first time I did this with Occupy Wall Street, we had squats, we had churches. Bradford, why do you say this? They must be very determined to stay and sleep in these uncomfortable parks night and day, setting up tables for first aid, legal aid, and even the library. He had like a list of things that were in Occupy Wall Street, and he just fit them into this fucking paragraph. You know, libraries with radical materials have historically been dangerous influences on the multitudes. That's why Shaz is all about the libraries, but it's like, what is your worldview, Ralph Nader? Do you really, are you a radical librarian? Are you a, it's hard for me to tell what this dude believes in. Time out, Stet. Let me show you why they are here today and why they will most likely be gone tomorrow. Do they have leaders? No, they proudly reject leaders and even the very trait of leadership. Show me a successful movement or business or union drive. I'll show you leaders. It can't happen without leaders to give form and direction over time, no matter how unpleasant they may be. See, so this is where I decided to do these videos, and I was like, well, I need to slow down and unpack this. Because what are you arguing here, Ralph? You're saying through the words of these two business people dining high above Wall Street, who possibly are willing to kick a child beggar. Like, first of all, I'm in the homeless shelter. I'm getting 3 square meals, plus I'm getting $200 a month. Food stamps are $150, whatever the fuck. I'm spending it like crazy. It's free money. I buy a lot of bullshit. The mac and cheese is good though. But we don't have child beggars. We have so many social services. We should do more. What I'm noticing is that the food and the beds are there, but the spirit isn't. So maybe we need to pay these people more. We have to get more of the latest like psychology or sociology involved. I just feel lost, and I think of a lot of other people, but then I'm trying to be lost because I'm writing and reading and thinking. But yeah, I fucking like found myself lost in the homeless. So anyways, there's not child beggars out there. And people fucking have a more complex view of human nature, where there's not just an evil traitor. That's what, when I read the book, I wouldn't even be able to take it this deep. But when you stop and you actually think and you speak, you realize how shallow the conversations are by which these people make their name. This is Ralph Nader. This is his brand. He comes out with like a couple of these books a year. And you have nothing to tell me. And so what are you telling me right here? Do we have leaders? No, we proudly reject leaders, even the very trait. So he's basically, the business person is saying that every movement, business, union drive has leaders, no matter how unpleasant they're needed. But should we take these business guys' advice? It's like you use your opposition to defend your point, which is a really weird thing to do. It makes you seem not sincere that they're the opposition, or not sincere enough to come up with your own defenses for your own points. So you're like, look at Chevron at least does this. Walmart even has found out that increasing environmental standards or practices are good for the bottom line, and he's like, why? So we can all shop more at Walmart? We're not interfering with the cause and effect of why Walmart is so massive that some people can't afford not to shop with them. Amazon's becoming the same way. You don't want a market captured by a fucking hegemon. That's not free market practices or ideals. Trust busting would be something he can bring up. Maybe he's going to bring it up later on. But then how can he use Walmart to defend a point over here and then bring up busting it up as a trust over here? Or at least questioning them when he brought up Walmart being on supposedly private. It's like, is that a trigger towards socialism, communism? Let's just bring up a very specific injustice, which is that municipalities are forced to monetize as much of their land use policies as possible to pay the debt that they're fed from Wall Street. That's an argument you can make with your current values and your current characters, but it would be a more complex argument. I wonder why he doesn't make it. So again, he's going into that pattern here where he's wanting us to trust the wisdom of these people who would kick a child beggar. So he's saying, so it's like, he says, show me a successful movement, business union drive, I'll show you leaders. But why do I trust these guys? What if the distributive direct democracy practice that we were practicing in Occupy Wall Street, what if that was our one good? Because that was the framework upon which we can build a more inclusive, responsive system. Because the problem is that the system isn't responsive. But that's not what people like Ralph Nader believe. They believe that the problem is you just don't have the right rulers with the right rules in place. If only I'm in charge, everything will be different, is what Ralph Nader keeps saying every time he runs for president. If only I'm in charge, everything will be different. Only if I'm in charge. If you have the winning argument, anyone should be able to execute it, right? They just have to have the communication skills and this and that. But it's about what we're trying to do. And what we're trying to do is build more equitable systems. We're not trying to imitate old bureaucracies with new bureaucracies with just a new label on them, like neo or new. So, and then he says, no matter how unpleasant, it can't, like, you're not even going to defend this, Ralph, you're just going to drop it out there, is that you can't have anything happen without leaders, even if you don't like those leaders. It doesn't sound very democratic. What are your values then? Your values are subservience to authority. That's what you basically said, that without firm authority structures in place, you can't have progress. I think that's demonstrably false. That goes against the ethics of anarchism, and also that goes against current business culture, which is currently flattening pyramids to provide more horizontals, as David Graeber would say. Horizontals. He just drops that into a paragraph. The fucking slippery shit is that. Come on, Ralph. Bradford. And you don't get mad at people because these might be his blind spots, his subconscious. He has an inner desire for authority. He might be a religious dude. I think so. I think he relies on like some sort of religious tradition, and those usually push you towards authoritarian thoughts. But we have to edit ourselves, audit ourselves. These might not be malicious patterns in society. They might just be a reflection of our lowered state of consciousness, and so we just have to mature individually and as a society, is a non-hippie way of saying it. You got to increase your consciousness, dude. Elevate your consciousness to a high state of being. Just grow the fuck up. Grow the fuck up, Ralph. It's the problem in the world isn't a lack of leaders. It's a fucking overabundance of bullshit. I'm counting you among the bullshit right now. Bradford, you're right up to a point. But a mob doesn't have to have leaders. It just has to have emotion, motive, a target, and a sudden jolt or spark that can come anywhere. I mean, that's what you're giving us. You're giving us emotions, motives, and a target. You're not giving us reason. You use mob logic yourself, Ralph. Lawless. With modern high-tech crowd controls, mobs can be spotted very early with corner surveillance cameras and dispersed in 100 ways. Our good police, public and private, get tremendous adrenaline bursts in the face of advanced mobs. Is this the best way to describe it? Just say they beat our ass, dude. In fact, why don't you bring up the leaked FBI documents that the fusion centers were allowing the government to use the George Bush passed Patriot Act laws and the newly funded and fucking militarized Homeland Security to coordinate between local police, local corporations, or local police, large corporations, and the federal government. So the large corporations are doing their own private detail on security, threat assessments, then coordinating with the police for actions. And in the report that I read, if you do search, Control F, and look up snipers, that the corporations seem to have offered snipers of targeted leadership individuals, because we have leadership. You can't have any organization without leadership. So we have people in charge of housing, in charge of food. I was trying to get the finance to audit their books. You can't. It's not like we didn't have leadership. We were trying to create it as democratic, directly democratic as possible, because it was an anarchist organization stewarded by anarchists based on anarchist principles. Any positive grew out of that. Any negative was a betrayal of those principles. Anarchist principles being supposedly the natural impulse of human beings to organize themselves without authority, which is what we attempted. And then we were, until the money was taken away, and we were instigated out of being able to organize anymore. But anyways, yeah, why don't you just bring up, like, these documents have been linked and they're out there in the public, but they're not. It's not in a newspaper. And Ralph Nader makes his worldview based off of the newspaper. So if you want to manipulate a person like Ralph Nader, you just have to control the mainstream news media narratives. That's what it is. You want to base your world view, I think, not on the media, but on first-hand sources, and then you construct your worldview, and then you research it, and then you fit the media and everything else into an ongoing discussion based off of facts. And that's what we're trying to do: create a narrative of a reality that's based in reality. But instead, there's more. Occupy has no agenda or program that millions can relate to. Sure, inequality, I just said it, anti-corporatist. Corporations have too much control of our political apparatus. And then all the questions were like, all right, should we concentrate on this or that? Election reform was like one of our surefire things. But pretty much it was all like, just fuck the corporate bullshit, fuck the corporate media, which is why the media reported us poorly. Because no one in the camp thought we were getting a fair shake in the media. Occupy has no agenda or program that millions can relate to. Sure, inequality, 99% makes a good slogan because people believe it to be true. After all, don't we, really? But without either religious fervor or some kind of ideological ism, both out of tune with the times, all they're left with are actual reforms for which they have little interest or patience. This is where they're really missing the boat on the vehicle of change, because they detest politics. Yeah, because what, you want to organize all of the energy and effort of Occupy Wall Street into raising the minimum wage, which is what a lot of people were doing, actually. A lot of people were actually, like, saying, all right, let's prioritize this, let's do election reform, let's do minimum wage, but, like, the organization itself was a larger experiment than just pushing through a policy. It was an experiment in a new form of organizing politically, whether it should become a nonprofit or a political party or something. It was being able to plug in and communicate that way was the magic of it. But you'd have to have participated in it to understand. It's like politics don't work right now. So we need, what is politics? But a system in order to matriculate information from those affected from the decisions to the decision makers themselves. Direct democracy is where they're the same person, that everyone affected is a decision maker. And as we get further and further removed through representation, we want to make sure just that chain is connected. So we should work on that. That seems pretty obvious. Our democracy is broken. Let's fix our democracy. Ralph Nader's like, our democracy is broken. Let's treat the symptoms of the problem by getting you to buy into a broken system. I don't trust anyone who's trying to get me to buy into a broken system. And he's saying, well, we should have had leaders that the broken system could have co-opted. And now he's saying we had no agenda. We had so many working groups. We had like hundreds of... I started the farms working group, Occupy the Food System. We had a farm that was going to be donated to us. And then we had a collection of like up to 12 farms people were going to visit and work on and bring food back for the movement. We didn't have like a strong central base identifying identity. We just, things broke up. And the first arguments about money and other stuff, we didn't have a unifying core. We were like all kind of, I think, eventually deciding Occupy was bullshit. But, so he's saying religious fervor or ideological ism. All we're left with are actual reforms for which they have little interest or patience. Reforms, like why are you even using that word? Let's just end war and get fucking our democracy back from corporate interest. How hard is it? Where's the money going? It's going to the war. Benefits corporations, literally trading lives for corporate profit. Let's end that one. That seems like the first one. We're missing the boat and vehicle of change. He wants us to get involved in the fucking current democratic system, which is spinning the wheels doing nothing. We detest politics for a reason, Ralph Nader. What do you mean? Instead, why do you think our higher class spends so much money and time and influence on Congress? Because that's where the desired action or inaction resides in our governmental system. Arouse Congress and we get tax breaks, subsidies, bailouts, contracts, giveaways, and little enforcement of laws against us. Freeze Congress and the masses get nothing. Or worse, they get rollbacks of protections for their economic well-being, health, safety, children, and the shrieking pay, jobs, and pensions. So it's like, it's not like there are people saying let's create utopia and let's just not practice in society or politics. But we would have eventually become a third Democratic Party or something. People were saying we have to endorse Obama, we have to endorse the Democrats. That's where everyone was against, because it was an organization of people beyond political identities. Because shit was so bullshit overtly, we could all get together and just say, look, things need to change. And that was the first organizing principle of our identity. And so you say, no, we should be like the rich, and we can't outgun them. You just proved just a little bit of logic right here. Our class spends so much money and time and influence in Congress. So you want us to spend more money than them? We can't do that. And they have the money, so they have already organizations they've created. It seems like political guerrilla warfare, what we're doing right here, out in the public, is our best option, playing to our strengths. We have people, and we have ideas. Let's organize those. We don't need money, right? And then the money was coming in. We had $750,000. But we had to basically continue the conversation that we were stopped from continuing. Physically, we were beat by the police. And then the instigators kept pushing us off the tracks to other shit. So by detesting politics, they avoid surrounding members of Congress at their offices back home or Capitol Hill. They avoid the single victory that could be theirs in this election year. And that is raising the federal minimum wage to over $10 per hour to where it was inflation adjusted in 1968. That's your stump speech. Nader, I'm talking about bigger structural issues. And you're over here just being like, let's focus all of our energy, all of our it's like all of our manpower on one small little thing, on this one nail that you're fascinated with. And that doesn't count. This is how you write a book this long and say basically nothing or not much. This book could fit on a postcard. And that doesn't count the double worker productivity since that time and the resultant wealth, which our class has regularly appropriated for our coffers. What do you mean class? So you're saying if I was sitting up there and I was born poor, relatively poor, and I was sitting up there, then am I a part of their class? Is it what I'm born into, or is it what I'm earning? And then, why don't you just come out and say it? You don't want, that's what, I agree, there's an inequality ceiling, and we want to make sure that those who are getting the most out of society aren't hoarding it, so we could redistribute some of the top with progressive taxes. But why do we got to vilify them? I hope to go back to the top of society just because I think I have a good brain and I like to work. I like to make money. I'm probably going to be good for it with it, and I don't mind if the government takes a larger percentage. I get the logic, and I'm along for that. I don't like the emotional triggering of pitting people against people. So, our class and this and that. It's I don't know, dude, there's some hippie rich people, come on. So anyways, Stet, over 70% of people polled support keeping the minimum. It's like all the library systems that happened from Rockefeller, or what's his name, or Carnegie. Yeah, Carnegie was a library dude. It's there's good and there's bad. People are complicated. Don't vilify people just because they made it, though, because you might lose some good wisdom from those people. Over 70% of people polled support keeping minimum wage raises current with inflation. Hundreds of groups influence want it. They're at least on record, like the AFL-CIO. It's just he's saying a bunch of shit they said already. But none are on the ramparts back to the French Revolution. This is it's just interesting. This is supposed to be a mature person in the world having a mature discussion, and he's just picking out. It's like religious dogma. He picks out a little bit of